cruelest irony is this: the people who feel the deepest often suspect something is broken inside them. Carl Jung saw why. Most live inside collective scripts, safe, shallow, obedient, but a few cannot. Their intensity refuses anesthesia. Their curiosity won't kneel. Jung called them differentiated individuals, pioneers of consciousness, maybe 5% at most. Tragedy follows the rare. Their gifts are recoded as defects. Emotional depth is labeled oversensitive. Curiosity becomes overthinking. Independence, arrogance. To survive, many dim the signal, starve their questions, sand down the edges of their wonder. Jung's radical correction, "You're too much," may be the signature of psychological rarity. Not a malfunction, an advanced setting. Yet every gift carries a shadow. Unintegrated depth sinks into despair. Untethered curiosity isolates. Sensitivity without boundaries exhausts. Survival demands integration, not suppression. In this video, we'll map 8 Jungian markers of rarity and how to carry them without burning out. As you listen, don't ask, "Do I have these signs?" Ask, "How am I stewarding them? Am I performing small to fit the room, or learning to hold my voltage?" Because here is Jung's haunting wager. Rare individuals are bridges between the mass unconscious and the future of awareness. The question isn't whether you're rare, it's whether you'll survive your rarity long enough to serve with it. If you've ever felt like an exile for feeling too much, thinking too far, seeing too clearly, you are not broken, you're early. Stay with me. We'll start where rare journeys begin, the psychology the crowd cannot admit, the shadow it projects on the few who refuse to sleep. Step in, the room will darken before it brightens. That's how you know you're close to the door. Cross it, and the traits you feared become instruments. Depth becomes compass, curiosity becomes fuel, sensitivity becomes strength disciplined by clarity. Imagine a child standing in a crowded classroom. The teacher speaks, the students laugh, the noise of collective agreement fills the air. Everyone nods when the teacher says 2 + 2 = 4. But the child is distracted, not by the lesson, but by something else. He notices the way the teacher's hand trembles as she writes on the chalkboard. He notices the sadness hidden in her smile. He notices that when the class laughs together, one boy in the back forces his laughter, eyes down, desperate not to be noticed. This child cannot help but see what others do not. While the classroom is focused on facts, the child is drowning in feeling. He goes home that night, wondering why he feels so heavy when no one else does. His parents tell him he's sensitive, maybe too sensitive. His friends tease him for asking questions they can't answer. Why do people pretend? Why do adults lie? Why do we act like everything's fine when it's not? Years pass. The child grows into an adult. He learns to hide his questions, to dim his intensity, to bury his depth beneath silence. But inside, he still sees. He still feels. He still knows that something is off, not with him, but with the world. This is the story of every rare personality Jung described. It begins with exile, with the unbearable realization that your way of experiencing reality doesn't match the majority. You notice the tremor in the hand, the forced laughter, the silence behind the noise. You see cracks where others see walls. Jung compared this process to alchemy, the ancient art of transforming base metals into gold. For the rare, life itself becomes an alchemical process. Ordinary experiences pass through them, and instead of simply reacting, they are transmuted into meaning. But like alchemy, the process is messy. Lead doesn't want to become gold. It resists, it burns. And so too, the rare individual suffers. They carry weight others can't even see. Here's the metaphor Jung might have used if he lived today. Imagine standing in a crowded concert hall. The music is loud, the crowd is swaying, everyone is caught in rhythm. But while most hear only the melody, you hear every instrument individually. You notice the flute slightly out of tune, the drummer rushing ahead, the singer's breath straining. The experience is overwhelming. Beautiful, yes, but exhausting. This is what it means to be rare. Where others hear noise, you hear layers. Where others see surfaces, you see depths. Where others accept, you question. It's no wonder society calls this too much. It is too much for them, but it is exactly enough for you. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche once wrote, "And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music." That is the fate of rare personalities. They hear music the world cannot. They see truths others deny. And so they are misunderstood, labeled, exiled. But here's the haunting truth. Exile is not a punishment. It is preparation. Because those who see differently are the ones who eventually lead differently. Think of history's great innovators. Galileo, condemned for seeing stars where others saw heavens. Socrates, executed for asking questions that destabilized comfort. Jung himself, estranged from Freud because he refused to reduce the psyche to sexual drives alone. These were not defects, they were differentiations. They were examples of consciousness advancing one lonely step at a time. And so the metaphor becomes clear. Rare personalities are not broken mirrors. They are prisms. What looks like fragmentation is actually refraction, light passing through them, splitting into colors others cannot yet perceive. But let me ask you, what happens when a prism is placed in a dark room? Its gift remains invisible. Its brilliance is mistaken for emptiness. Its potential for illumination lies dormant until the right light passes through. This is the danger Jung warned about. Rare individuals often live in dark rooms, surrounded by people who cannot see their spectrum, who confuse their intensity for weakness, their vision for delusion, their silence for emptiness. And so, the challenge of the rare is not only to survive misunderstanding, but to find the light that reveals what they are. But how does this play out in real life? In your relationships, your workplace, your daily existence? That's where the signs become unmistakable. It's one thing to study Jung's theories. It's another to watch them breathe through ordinary life, at work, with friends, in love, and online. If you've ever felt out of place, you've likely lived these patterns already. In the workplace, most people play along. They nod in meetings, prefer palatable lies to useful truths, and treat harmony as the highest KPI. If you are rare, you can't unsee the seams, the risk no one priced, the shortcut no one dares name, the ego contest beneath the slide deck. You ask the question that stills the room, and suddenly you are difficult, a threat. Jung would disagree. That's not obstinacy, it's depth, the psyche's push to reconcile what appears with what is. Conformity buys applause today, vision pays the compound interest tomorrow. In friendships, the crowd bonds over distraction, small talk, gossip, endless scroll. Nothing wrong until it starves you. You crave meaning, dreams, psychology, purpose. You laugh politely, but the hunger stays. Jung's tension between persona and self explains the suffocation. The mask buys acceptance. The self demands expression. In romance, rarity is blessing and risk. You love with voltage. You see not just your partner's smile, but their shadow, the wound beneath the habit, the fear beneath the anger. That vision powers profound empathy and also a trap. Seeing too much tempts forgiving too much. Carrying another's pain tempts abandoning your own. Without shadow work and boundaries, empathy becomes chains. You stay, believing love will heal what only responsibility will. On social media, the stage rewards surfaces, dopamine loops, curated masks, performance intimacy. Most scroll without question. The rare feel the emptiness inside the spectacle. So they use the platforms as tools, not mirrors, sharing ideas, setting limits, choosing depth over reach. Depth rarely goes viral. Rarity measures on a different axis. Do you see the pattern? Across work, friendship, love, and the digital commons, rarity feels like exile. You see too much, feel too much, ask too much, and the system punishes the surplus. That rejection is not evidence of weakness, it's evidence of calibration. Jung called the long arc individuation, subtracting borrowed roles until the authentic design remains. So the question isn't, do you fit in, but will you survive standing out? Survival requires translation, turning perception into service, boundaries into bridges, solitude into craft. Because once you see these patterns in daily life, you must look deeper, beneath behavior, to the psychology that drives it. That's where Jung's insights stop sounding poetic and start becoming operational, and where rarity, understood correctly, stops feeling like exile and starts becoming leverage. In next section, we'll surface 8 concrete signs of psychological rarity and the practices that keep them from burning you out. Read them as mirrors, not medals for you to use wisely. Carl Jung believed the psyche is not a machine, but a vast inner landscape. Conscious thought is only its surface. Beneath lies the unconscious, instincts, fears, archetypes, and symbols quietly shaping every choice we make. Most people live what Jung called an unconscious life, repeating patterns, playing out roles scripted by family and culture, mistaking habit for freedom. But the rare personality cannot stay asleep. Their unconscious rises insistently, demanding attention, forcing them to feel, to question, to grow. This intensity is not a flaw. It is evidence of depth, proof that their unconscious refuses to stay buried. The shadow and differentiation. Jung's most haunting idea was the shadow, the rejected parts of ourselves we are taught to deny. Most suppress it. They project it onto others and remain fractured. But rare individuals cannot. They feel its pull. They know they cannot be whole until they embrace both their light and their darkness. This is what Jung called differentiation of consciousness, the capacity to hold contradictions, to see nobility and ugliness in themselves without collapse. Freud argued repression fuels neurosis. Jung went further. Repression fuels mediocrity. The rare suffer because they cannot repress. They must integrate. The evolutionary lens. From an evolutionary view, conformity ensured survival. Blend in with the tribe or risk exile. An exile once meant death. Yet outliers were always necessary. The questioners, the innovators, the ones who could imagine something beyond survival. These rare personalities are psychological scouts. Their refusal to settle, their relentless sensitivity, are not maladaptations, but evolutionary sparks that pull society forward. The cognitive bias trap. Daniel Kahneman revealed what Jung intuited. Humans are not rational. We live under cognitive biases, shortcuts that distort reality. Confirmation bias, availability bias, groupthink, all keep the herd safe but blind. The rare individual resists these traps. They cannot accept consensus simply because it feels safe. They see when something does not add up. But this resistance carries a cost: alienation. To stand apart from bias is to risk standing apart from the group. Rare people live this paradox daily: authenticity versus belonging. Attachment and sensitivity. Attachment theory deepens the picture. Highly sensitive individuals often show anxious or avoidant patterns, not from brokenness, but because their nervous systems register relationships intensely. Withdrawal feels like a wound. Betrayal feels catastrophic. Their depth makes them extraordinary partners, but also vulnerable ones. Without boundaries, sensitivity decays into self-sacrifice. Without awareness, empathy becomes enslavement. The rare must wield sensitivity like a blade, sharp, deliberate, controlled. The prison of rarity. The very gifts that elevate can also destroy. Emotional depth becomes drowning. Curiosity becomes paralysis. Independence becomes isolation, sensitivity becomes exhaustion, purpose becomes obsession. Jung warned of inflation, when one is consumed by archetypal energy, losing balance. Rare individuals must walk a razor's edge, honoring their rarity without being devoured by it. Society's defense mechanism. Why does society reject the rare? Because they expose what others hide. Most cling to the persona, the mask of normality. Rare individuals, by their authenticity, threaten that mask. They remind others of their denied shadows, their unanswered questions, and so they are resisted, mocked, even attacked. Nietzsche saw it clearly. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Rarity is not punished for being wrong, but for being dangerous. The beauty in the burden. Yet exile has purpose. Jung called it individuation, the journey toward wholeness, where shadow and self unite. Most never attempt this. For the rare, it is destiny. Their loneliness is not meaningless. It is initiation. It forges them into who they truly are. And this is why Jung called individuation the privilege of a lifetime. So the question is this: how does the rare survive in a world that misunderstands them? How do they transform rarity from curse into strength? That leads us to the next step: application. Awareness is the first step, but without strategy, it becomes a curse. Depth without boundaries turns into drowning. Sensitivity without protection collapses into exhaustion. Curiosity without grounding becomes endless wandering. So how do you live as rare without being destroyed by it? 1. Protect your energy like currency. Your attention is money. Every reaction, every emotional investment is a withdrawal. Most spend recklessly, gossip, shallow drama, endless scrolling, and end up bankrupt. The rare cannot afford this. You must spend wisely. Say no more often. Refuse access to those who drain you. Protect your presence, and your depth becomes strength instead of a chain. 2. Practice strategic detachment. Detachment isn't apathy, it's clarity. Freud called it ego strength. Jung called it individuation. It means caring without being controlled by caring. In practice, don't rush to reply. Allow silence. Let others project without correcting them. This doesn't make you cruel. It makes you unpredictable and therefore powerful. 3. Train sensitivity into strategy. Your depth is radar. You see what others miss, energy shifts, unspoken truths. But raw sensitivity makes you a sponge. Trained sensitivity makes you a strategist. In the workplace, label the tension rather than absorb it. In relationships, mirror pain instead of carrying it. Sensitivity is your superpower, but only when directed by awareness. 4. Treat solitude as training, not punishment. Society fears solitude. Jung revered it as the crucible of individuation. Solitude is where you sharpen yourself, integrate shadow, and build an inner fortress. Don't run from loneliness. Sit with it, shape it. Let it prepare you for the world that cannot touch you. 5. See relationships as mirrors, not lifelines. Most seek completion through others, but Jung warned us, relationships are mirrors. They reflect unconscious shadows back at us. Criticism reveals projection. Idealization reveals denial. Your own triggers reveal the parts you've buried. Stop drowning in relationships by using them as mirrors for growth, not lifelines for rescue. 6. Accept rarity as responsibility. To be rare is not just gift, but burden. You see what others won't. You question what others accept. Jung warned against the messianic complex, believing it's your job to save everyone. Your responsibility is not to fix the world, but to live authentically, because evolution begins with individuals who refuse illusion. 7. Daily practices of the rare. Journaling for shadow work. Record impulses you'd rather hide. Make them conscious. Meditation for emotional distance. Train yourself to observe without reacting. Boundaries as discipline. Practice saying no when it's small so you can when it's big. Meaning, over metrics. Stop asking, does this make me liked? Start asking, does this make me alive? These disciplines are the armor of the rare, and here lies the paradox. When you stop apologizing for your rarity, when you guard it and live it fully, the haunting question fades. It's no longer, am I too much? The truth reveals itself. The world is too little. Endings are never really endings. In Jungian psychology, every ending is a threshold. What was once unconscious is now revealed. You came here searching for answers. Maybe you've always felt too sensitive, too intense, too different. Maybe you've carried that weight as proof that something was wrong with you. But your difference is not a defect. It is a design. Carl Jung called it psychological rarity, a form of consciousness so rare that fewer than 5% of people ever develop it. To be rare is to see what others ignore, to feel what others deny, to question what others accept. It is to be awake in a world half asleep. Yes, it feels like exile, but exile is initiation. Separation is what forges the rare into leaders, visionaries, catalysts. The danger is not that the world rejects you, it's that you reject yourself, silencing your gifts for acceptance. Jung warned, the psyche rebels against inauthenticity. To betray yourself is to fracture your soul. To embrace yourself is to step into wholeness. So ask yourself, will you keep apologizing for your intensity, or will you wear it like a crown? Because the truth is brutal. The one who cares less about being liked and more about being authentic rules the room, not by force, but by stillness. In a world addicted to reaction, the one who doesn't react becomes untouchable. Remember this, you are not too much. The world is too little. Your depth is a frontier. Your sensitivity is radar. Your refusal to settle is necessity. So the question remains, will you betray yourself for belonging, or will you accept yourself completely, and in doing so, become untouchable?